Hello everyone and welcome to the Men of War Assault Squad 2 Gem Editor. We are back in this. It's been quite a while, probably almost 2 years since I've hopped into this editor to try and make a map. So here at the beginning of this video, I'm going to be explaining exactly what we're doing. As you guys know, the last thing we were working on was a War Thunder map, kind of translated to this game so that we could try to, bring the two wargaming things that I enjoyed playing together. And then from there, we'll be able to, make a map pack for Men of War for people who enjoy the War Thunder maps. So that's kind of the goal again for this. We are starting over since it's been so long since I played Men of War. I have lost a lot of kind of my base save. So it is, it's kind of starting fresh, and I'm totally fine with that. We have a lot to kind of, I guess, sit on and think about when we start something fresh. So initially here, I'm going through and I'm trying to refamiliarize myself a little bit with the controls and the painting scheme and the way things are kind of done in this editor. It's not like Planet Coaster in the sense that, textures and things seamlessly blend together without using layers or anything like that. Using this is a little bit more Photoshop-esque with some awkward boundaries. There's no real transparency between each layer. Each layer is kind of treated as a separate thing. And so you have to kind of build up items in a very very well thought out methodically. There we go, words. Kind of way. So I'm doing that now, kind of testing out some textures, see how it's gonna look, especially since it's gonna be repeating very heavily. I've kind of set on my general feel of how I want it to be. So initially what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise up the terrain about 50 units. Now this is going to give us some depth to work with a little bit with the terrain itself. And then I'm going to rough in, roughly to scale, some hills in the corresponding locations. We are going to be building the Eastern European map from War Thunder. And this little section here is a little bit from memory, just knowing that the lower right hand corner, this is kind of where one team spawns and they start up on top of a hill and they kind of drive into a town, and then the left side a little bit less of a hill and flat plains, and they drive into town from there. So that's what I'm trying to do in this initial section, right? Because establishing scale, super important. It's going to help you with pretty much everything else with the map, and once the scale is established, we can go ahead and do what I'm doing now. Some people would probably just do this straight up with the terrain. However, you'll notice this episode we are using the painting function a lot, and that is to go in, get the rough idea of a lot of elements first, such as major terrain shapes, and also key features such as roads, with the paint tool. That way we can quickly edit it, change things as quickly as possible. You get a little bit of a slower effect if you just hopped straight into the terrain function, I feel. And it becomes a little bit harder to edit things. So you can see just getting the width of this and the overall shape of this kind of winding river canal system that goes through this town. It takes a couple tries, but I'm fairly confident in this one. And, again, my scale could change as we progress through the map. In fact, it will change dramatically. I'm going to have to do some tests on some additional detailing as soon as possible. Now you'll notice the way that I do terrain, kind of hillsides, is that I start with sharp, kind of jagged, almost like a topographical map like methodology here. So we are using just solid 50 unit steps of height changes, and we're roughing out the shape to roughly where they need to be. Not worrying about smoothness, nothing like that. We're just going in and carving out the space and the initial kind of hillside here that tanks and units are going to be spawning and going down into the town. And then, you know, after testing that out, kind of looking at this and maybe the map, I was like, okay, well, let's try and put some roads in before I get too dedicated to some of these hillsides. And upon just doing some of these roads with the paint tool, just using grass because the texture used is kind of irrelevant, and seeing how much room there is to work and how wide these are by default, I'm kind of like looking at it and overall very confused about the scale and also some of the basic controls. Here I'm trying to plop down some road assets so I can kind of see how wide this paint is, and I'm having trouble even seeing them. And then I realized that there's a fog of war option that I apparently enabled at some point, and I needed to turn that off. Hence why it's getting instantly brighter. I think that is either Control F or Alt F for fog of war toggle. Something super important for those of you who want to learn the editor. There's not very much documentation that I found still, you know, online. Men of War is kind of a niche game market, you could say. You know, it's a strategy game, but it's a little buggy and glitchy, but hey, it's a good one nonetheless. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and use asphalt as the road kind of markings here. Going along the canals, that's going to be a key feature, kind of drawing out a lot of these roads, and near the end what I'll do is I'll probably overlay my source reference when it comes to these roads, and we'll take a look at it more in real time so you guys can take it in. And you know, I'm not worried about getting it exactly right. I'm more worried about getting the loose area there. So some of these city street blocks are not quite the correct scale. Just as long as the general premise is there, I can work with that. And then as we work, usually I work from the right to the left. Some people work from the center out. I generally like to start at one side and move over to the left, and if I need to make it bigger, I just make the left bigger. If I started more in the center, I would have to make everything and every side potentially bigger. So I usually start potentially in one area and keep working from there. Now this whole process might look weird to some people. You know, whenever you're kind of just drawing or laying out kind of a cityscape, especially without any buildings or any details like that, just the overall map view can be a little confusing because it's not how I would necessarily lay out a town. Like if I had to make my own and not have any references for this, I would be designing something very different and probably a little bit more, I guess you could say, catered and pristine in certain areas. You know, a little bit more organization when it comes to some of these city blocks and the way they converge and bend together. But I find, even in city skylines, that I have a hard time doing kind of an organic European city, which is what this is very much modeled after. So the streets are a little inefficient, you know, due to just town growth. Everything is just kind of a little wonky, has its own character and a little bit of its own story with it, which is, you know, something that I struggle with, even looking at the map and trying to put it together. So it's something that you just have to take your time doing. I went ahead and did the other side of the canal there. I think it's going to be interesting in Men of War to have such a heavily urban map here. Not only because the destruction is going to dramatically change the gameplay of the map, how, you know, and how about you do things over time, because you're going to start losing cover. But I don't see many maps with there's just almost all urban. Usually it's a lot of fields, maybe a small village or like a farmland thing, is what I see most people play on. And I'm a little worried. Part count can be an issue. As you guys know, I've run into part count issues before when it comes to Men of War. Hopefully we won't run into that here, but we'll see. Now with the roads kind of laid a little bit more proper, a little bit more set in stone, I can go back in with the terrain tool, work on the mountainscape a little bit more, get that in a more finalized state, you know, at least roughly finalized state. Smooth it out a bit, so that we can start getting like farmland on these hills and textures and roads built, and leaving it rough in some areas where maybe it's a little bit more steep, blend it more in others where it's more of a gradual slope down. And now we get to lay down our first few props. Not many props get laid down in this first episode here. Initially, it is just a big test to see how things are working. I need a bridge asset for this. There's a very big bridge that spans almost from the complete right side of my screen to the complete left side of my screen that I need to build. The road along the canal and river actually go underneath of it. So it needs to be tall enough, and it needs supports wide apart enough to fit vehicles, troops, supply lines through there. So that is why I'm looking at different bridge assets, trying to make them work together and combining them. And I think this is what I enjoy most about map making in general, is that it's very much like Planet Coaster in the sense that you just kind of cram bits together. And the game kind of goes ahead and takes care of how it's going to function automatically. So for example, this bridge, even though it's many bridges put together in somewhat of a haphazard way, and it has sloped parts where they really shouldn't be sloping that much in the game by default, it still functions. And it's something that you want to test as you go through the map making process. You want to make sure you can get a tank, specifically probably a heavy tank, because it's kind of late game, right? Because if a heavy tank can make it across, a smaller tank can make it across. And so as you can see there, spawn in a couple tanks, put some people on there, and off they go. There's another one of these bridges right off this road. I'm going to start calling this one of the main roads, the northern main road, and then the southern main road is probably the one that cuts through directly through town. But these are the two largest bridges, and I'm overall pleased with their look and how they mine the gap there. And now it's just about skinning them to make it look like the bridge from the game. So we need to add some more thicker stones to the sides, start hiding some of the wooden elements that's underneath here, because really they shouldn't be visible. And this is the time-consuming thing with any build, right? It's the customization, it's the little finicky bits that you need to work on kind of by hand and make it all jive together in some sort of fashion. We do test this, and I don't know if I do get this on camera or not. I'm pretty sure I do. And I'm always worried about structures, especially these long bridges that are very important when it comes to gameplay, right? These bridges are main keyways for troops to move across. I know it would be realistic to let it to be destroyed, a destructible object and everything like that, but when it comes to gameplay balance, it'd be a little bit of a hard game if everyone just destroyed their bridges and just camped on their side of the canal. There needs to be some sort of way for troops to go and attack the other side, and so these bridges need to be able to withstand tanks going across them, shells hitting them, and so those are things that we need to test as well as we progress through the map building process. You'll notice some of these bridgeways are kind of floating above the terrain. That's fine, and so we just made a custom little canal piece to go underneath them, give them the supports they really need, and also finish up the ramp on the left side, just continuing that slope. I think I got the slopes, I guess, close enough. The game is definitely a lot different when it comes to how they are sloped. And here, going across the bridge, you'll notice that the weight of the truck or tank there is actually enough to just start blowing the thing apart. That's a concern. I don't want that to happen. It's cool that it does do that. Here lighting on fire, making sure it doesn't like burn to the ground as well. But that's something that I need to go in here in the next episode and fix. Make sure these are indestructible items. That way, you don't get effects like that. Though, if you guys like them, maybe I'll keep it in there because it's kind of cool to see it just kind of explode under the sheer weight of the vehicle. Anyways, with that, we're going to go ahead and end the speed build section. I will take a look at the map a little bit in real time for you guys, just to wind down the episode. But if you guys enjoyed the speed build, definitely leave a like and comment down below here. Okay, so here we are taking a look at the Eastern European map that we started here this first episode. I went ahead and added a few other bridges across the key crossing points. These are going to be very important points of contention that you'll want to hold, because as you know, holding maybe one side of the river compared to maybe this side of the river is going to be super important. This is going to be probably a very important area because it can transition across three sides very quickly. And I'm hoping these bridges add a good sense of gameplay to them. At least hopefully they transfer well from War Thunder to Men of War. I've also added some water, just some simple river water in the middle there. Some of you might think that this looks a little weird right now, and I would agree. So what we'll do is I'll just throw in some general atmosphere. A lot of game elements in Men of War don't actually look quite right in the editor until you throw in the lighting, and then it actually starts making sense. So the water is far more clear now and looks a lot better. I haven't quite set on what lighting we want to use for it, but for now this is it. These smaller bridges are made up of different parts than the larger ones. I did like the railings that it naturally came with them. We did stitch them together as well, so it's kind of a stitched together bridge look. So what I'll do is I'll probably have to think of a heavy footer for each side of these. They do have elements that aren't in the base map, and that's these iron gates. I don't know if I want to keep these like them or not. In fact, I would like to get your guys' opinion if you do know of War Thunder and play it, if you're fine with keeping these, or if you want us to kind of just use these bridges for all of them and just get them to arch and then manually put some details across them for the railings. These are just 3 bridge pieces stuck together, which is quick and easy to do. They also need to arch rather high. That was part of the map as well. In fact, this bridge should probably do a full arch. That might be something I revisit as well. Let's see, anything else to go over? I don't think so yet. Big plans are that maybe the right side needs to be extended. I'm a little worried that the city is too close, so when people spawn in over in the southern quarter, maybe push it out a little bit more so there's some more room. This side's fine to spawn in. The left side is completely fine. There's really not much up here except for forests and some sparse buildings. Most of the fighting is probably going to take place here in the middle. Of course, that makes the most sense. We'll probably have, I want to say seven or so capture points, 1 in each corner, and then 3 across the middle. That way we just have a good line of contention going across. I'm not quite sure where we want those yet. I was hoping to maybe put them roughly where there's some capture points from War Thunder. I think that would be interesting. I don't know how well gameplay and balance-wise that goes, but we'll see and find out for sure as we progress. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed your first little look at the gem editor. If it's your first time checking this out, I don't know, if you have Men of War, look forward to it. There's also another series here on the channel of Men of War Gem Editor where we built a small full European map. That thing was actually finished and looked lovely. Raptor played some of that as well on his channel, which was great. Thank you for that. And now we have this one. So let's get to building, and hopefully you guys enjoy this series.